Hello, my name is Erica Georgiadis, and we are on the YouTube channel of the European School of Theosophy. Luckily, today here in Greece is a beautiful evening, the starry heaven, and I welcome you all. Before beginning, I want to thank Ian Nicholas Kings, the editor of Theosophy Forward magazine, for his immense support, work, devotion to the theosophical ideas. I also want to thank the team of the European School of Theosophy for their work and support. Today is the opening of our interview series for 2021. Remember, the shortest distance between two people is a story. Getting to know someone makes life beautiful, and we always have something new to learn. Today, we are honored with a distinguished guest. In October of 1974, he joined the Theosophical Society in America. In 1988, he started as a national lecturer of the TSA. He, together with others, founded the Theosophical Spiritual Community in Chicago's inner city. From 1996 to 2000, he worked in hospice services as a volunteer in a team that involved doctors, social workers, and nurses. In 2007, he became president of the Theosophical Order of Service, USA. In 2014, he was elected international president of the Theosophical Society, Adyar. He is now in the process of being re-elected and reconfirmed as international president of the TS for another 7 years term. So congratulations are in order. Thank you for being here with us today, and welcome, Tim Boyd.
Well, thank you, Erica. Good to be with you.
Tim, could you please share with us where are you living during the pandemic and how is the COVID situation over there?
Well, since February of last year, my wife and I returned from India, from Adyar. The plan was to be back there within a month or two. And of course, then the pandemic happened. So we've been in our home in Chicago since then. And, I don't need to tell too many people about the history of the United States in its response to this COVID epidemic, to this pandemic. So it's something that now apparently things are starting to lighten up. For the longest time, very little has been available in terms of, the normal things in life. But those are starting to become more available as more and more people are getting vaccinated. So it's a similar scenario to many places in the world now.
It is. So tell us, what have you been doing during the lockdown period, apart from your very intense work for the TS? For instance, do you have any hobbies? I heard you were learning how to play the flute and that you are a very good cook. So,
Well, I don't want to brag about my cooking, but I am a good cook. But you wouldn't mistake me for a chef. I'm one of those people who, if you open the refrigerator, open the cupboards, and I see what's there, whatever it is, I would be able to make some sort of multiple course meal and serve it. I learned my cooking really because when we used to host theosophical meetings in my home, after the meeting we would always have a vegetarian meal. I think a lot of people were favorably influenced by the talks and the discussions, but I know for a fact that a number of people became vegetarian based on the cooking. So I
wow.
don't know in which sphere it was that I did more good. Fortunately, now my daughter cooks, my wife cooks, and I cook sometimes.
Sometimes
Yeah, I
when
do
you feel
play. I,
inspired.
Yeah, when I feel inspired, yeah. And so pandemic time, you try things you had just thought of trying just because you run out of other things to do. But yeah, I did pick up the flute again 20 years ago. I had been playing it for a very brief while, and I enjoyed it so much. And because I travel, it's something that could go with me anywhere. So after 20 plus years, I decided it's time to retrace something that really brings me a great deal of joy. So I'm taking it up again. Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's very nice. I hope one day we can listen to you in the future playing the flute, perhaps during an international convention or something
My
like that.
goodness, put me on the biggest stage possible and then make me play.
It would be very nice. So then, could you share with us how do you came to know Theosophy and the Theosophical Society?
Yeah. Well, I don't come from a theosophical family. So, there was really no one in my family who was along this particular line. Um, and quite honestly, it wasn't something I was looking for in any conscious way. And in the United States, I grew up in New York. I hadn't heard of it. Um, but as happens with many people, I think just a series of what we think of at that time as coincidences occurred that brought me into the presence of a person in Chicago, actually, who was, one of these people who was very, very vibrant. He was, when you come in his presence, there's like this electricity that you feel. And he traced it to his association with Theosophy. And so, based on that experience and a couple of things that transpired as a result of it, it was something that really drew my attention to Theosophy. And of course, from Theosophy, then also to the Theosophical Society and its work.
And what memory in your theosophical journey touched you most? A moment that has inspired you and you remember and you couldn't forget?
There, there have been a number of them. All of them have been in many ways related to the people that I have met in the Theosophical Society, people who were really alive in this way. But, quite honestly, the thing that propelled me in this direction was something quite different. As I said, having met this gentleman in Chicago who would later become a longtime teacher to me. I met him during a vacation where I came and visited Chicago. He spoke to me 2 times. I met him the first time. I didn't really want to meet him. Uh, a lot of younger people. I was 19 at the time. So just think back to what that means in terms of what your interests were. But as a 19-year-old, my cousin brought me to meet this fellow that he said they called the old man. And I was uninterested. But we went over and he talked. He said a number of very interesting things, but nothing that really hooked me. But circumstances again conspired to where immediately before I was leaving Chicago to go back to New York, my cousin brought me back by there. And this time it was just kind of one-on-one. And he was a very unusual man, and he spoke very deeply about Theosophy, but in a way that a 19-year-old could grasp it. He wasn't giving me quotations or references. And, he was also a deeply clairvoyant man, was what I was to find out. And so during that conversation, he had my full attention, but then he also said a couple of things that nobody would know but me. And I think he did it just to assure me that he has some degree of intelligence about what he's talking. So anyway, I left there, went back to New York, and then I started to go for a walk to try and think about all of these things that had just poured into me the night 2 days before. And while I was taking that walk is when, this transformative sort of inexplicable and unexplainable experience took place and completely altered my view of things. And so, in order to try to move more deeply in that direction, my priorities shifted. I took a term off from school. I thought it was going to be a term to go out and study with the old man. That term ended up being 13 years more until he died,
Oh,
finishing my schooling out there. And then at that point had become very, very involved with the Theosophical Society. So that's like the thumbnail version of why we're sitting here talking.
can we know his name?
Bill Lawrence.
Bill
Bill
Lawrence.
Lawrence.
Oh, yeah.
He was very good friends with Joy Mills and Dora Kuntz and John Coates, but he was always someone who worked, I wouldn't say in the background. He had his own work, which was focused on younger people in the Chicago area. Initially, he was working with a lot of these youth gang members. That was before I had met him. But then he just turned his work focus completely on young people. And so there was a group of us that formed around him. We formed a spiritual community in the heart there of Chicago. Out of that, we formed a business. Out of that, we formed a group that would work with healing and with the TS. So it was a very exceedingly active time over a number of years.
That's very interesting. And was your work this Theosophical group with Bill Lawrence? Was it in the inner city of Chicago?
Well, that was the location where we were staying, although, we were interacting with the Theosophical Society in various places, but the focus of it really was in Chicago. And, again, wherever you have a group of like active younger people, they attract active younger people or younger people who want to become active. So there were all these younger people coming around. And so we ended up having classes related to meditation. Healing was a very big focus. At one point, we had a basketball team and
Wow.
we traveled through Mexico. We didn't intend to be a basketball team. We were just going on vacation. And they kept seeing how tall we all were. And everywhere we went, they'd say, "Are you a basketball team?" Somebody finally said yes. And at one of these border crossings in Mexico, northern New Mexico, I think it was in Chihuahua, they had a basketball court. They said, "Well, come on, let's see what you can do." And I used to be actually a very good basketball player.
Wow.
So when we got out here on this court in Mexico, the rim was 1 foot lower than it is in the United States. And, they thought I was Michael Jordan after we got done LeBron. But then we named the team the Theosophias. We would play
Really?
basketball team
Do you
games.
have a picture of the team, Theosophias, to share with us?
It was so informal. It just
Oh,
grew up. It was what presented itself, is
yeah.
what I'm saying. But a lot of people we contacted in that way. Another time we had a singing group. Whatever it was, wherever we had some people who had particular talents, we were able to highlight that and then do it as a group.
That's fantastic. Very, very interesting. I know that it was a very intense period in your life when you were in this group with Bill Lawrence and all the work with the Royal Association
That's
you
right.
created and renovating buildings so that people of lower income, middle class and lower income, they could have their own residences. This was an amazing work you were doing, isn't it?
Well, it was, and particularly looking back, when you're into something, you never think of what you're doing as amazing. It's just what's in front of you.
Yes, yes.
But, at that time, we really started working with these buildings. And again, there's a whole host of stories of rather remarkable occurrences that put us in that direction. But as a group of young people, we pooled our money together. We purchased the first building, started working on it. Nobody had any particular skills, but we were willing to learn. As we learned, other people from the neighborhood came in, and then we started to train them. We took vacant lots where buildings had once been that were torn down. We planted vegetable gardens. We ended up winning prizes for our organically grown vegetable. I mean,
That's
and
sweet.
none of it is with the intention of proving or showing anything. It's just what's in front of us. And you do that with all your heart, and then the next door opens.
Yeah.
That was that moment.
Takes to another, and it goes on. Yeah.
I mean, everybody knows what that's about.
Yeah. So, well, in what ways, I could ask, Theosophy has influenced and changed your life? You are already more or less describing it, but in a deeper way, how this has changed your way of seeing things in your life as a person.
I mean, it's complete. It just really, in terms of the way I was living and my situation at the time that I first became acquainted with Theosophy and the Theosophical Society, I wasn't in a situation where outwardly there was any reason for me to be looking for this. I was fine. At least I would have said I was fine. But I was fine kind of living at the surface of things. And then the problem that one has is that if one ever sees something deeper, and of course I had this, totally altering, really a mystical experience that altered my point of view. The problem is that once you see something, you can't unsee it. And so either you choose to suppress or deny it, or you choose to follow in that direction. I followed in that direction. Of course, I didn't know how deep this hole went. You find out over time. But I do know my daughter asked my father once, every child wants to know what their parent was like when he was their age. And so she asked my dad, so what was dad like when he was young? And my father had to pause, which is always not a good sign. So he paused, and then he just said, he was difficult, which was correct. But he also said, but he has changed. And, I would owe it all to really, if you earnestly pursue what we describe as theosophy, or, the pursuit of the perception of reality, maybe, it's going to change you. And it's going to change you in ways that will make things better, and it will also cause you to lose things that you once valued highly. So that's been the path.
And what is Theosophy? How do you define it? Okay, I know that's the question. I know. So,
well, of course,
imagine you have someone who is like 19 years old coming to you and asking, what is Theosophy?
Yeah.
What would you say to him?
I mean, it's really according to who it is that you're talking to. Blavatsky never officially defined it, and I certainly do not think that I can exceed her. But, I always begin with the idea of the ageless wisdom. It's described as the ageless wisdom, but then that begs the question, because what then is the ageless wisdom? And, the idea to me is that there is a wisdom which is distinct from information or knowledge or cleverness. There is something we can describe as wisdom, which is internally verifiable. It goes beyond thought or any book you may read, but it's verifiable. And to the extent that we actually attempt to place ourselves in the presence of this wisdom, either through study, through quietness, then you start to find that your experience of it deepens. It's like putting a bar of iron next to a fire. The iron's cold, but in the presence of, it comes to life and starts to become much like the fire itself, hot. So wisdom, really relates to me. It is the perception of reality. So if you strip away all of the things that cloud our perception, what remains is this thing called wisdom. And really, it really does start to seem over time. The grayer I get in my hair, the simpler many things seem to become, actually. And, you've heard these words like compassion, love. All of these are words that have degrees of meaning, but really I start to feel as if, to the degree that we have really the understanding or the experience of what love is or what compassion is, then we start to border on the experience of wisdom. Because, it's the nature of love, compassion, that it removes limitations. It opens us to others. And if you extend that process far enough, it's limitless. And, each of us has the opportunity to kind of test it to the degree that we are capable of at any moment. And in the honest testing of that, there are necessarily results that we can then say, okay, maybe I'll take another step further. So that's what starts us on this journey. So Theosophy to me is a wisdom that is limitless, that is verifiable, and that we are capable of interacting with.
It's a living force that can be expressed in our lives.
Why did you have to ask me if you knew that already?
Well, come on. No, I'm just complimenting. Now, I have another question, which, something, well, you are doing a wonderful work, renovating the buildings of the international headquarters of the Theosophical Society. For whoever will be watching this video on YouTube, they are very old buildings. They are buildings from the 19th century. Buildings, for example, the Blavatsky bungalow is the building where first Madame Blavatsky lived with Olcott when they acquired the property of the international headquarters of the Theosophical Society, Adyar. And it was a very old building, historical place, and you have renovated it, isn't it, Tin? You have made a wonderful work renovating the building, and I saw the opening, the international convention, during one of the international conventions online. I wasn't there, but you are renovating also you plan to renovate to other buildings. You are now making more rooms and a little bit chambers, so it's possible to host more people. Do you plan to renovate the headquarters building itself?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. Just one slight correction. Blavatsky Bungalow, which was really the first major project that we did, is named after Blavatsky, but she never actually lived there. She actually lived in the headquarters building.
Oh,
Yeah,
I thought that in the beginning she lived there for some time, and after she moved to the headquarter buildings. That's
no,
why I was wondering.
that was actually Blavatsky Bungalow was actually one of the many properties that Annie Besant added to the estate.
Oh,
Immediately after she became president, within 4 years, she increased the estate from 26 or 27 acres to 260 acres.
oh,
This
yeah.
was one of the things. members of the Theosophical Society purchased that building and donated it to the society
Mm.
and named it Blavatsky Bungalow.
Okay,
But,
okay.
but Gandhi had been there, Rabindranath Tagore has been there, just
Yeah,
not HPB. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
No, but really with the campus itself, I mean, you've been there, but probably most of the people who are members of the Theosophical Society will never have an opportunity to see it. You know, circumstances don't permit us all to travel to India.
Yeah, it's
But
a
it's
yeah.
an absolutely beautiful campus. But as with anything, everything is in a process of deteriorating unless we take steps to make sure that we build it back up. So we had a lot of that. There are over 100 structures on the campus. Some much more meaningful than others, but all of them were in a state of decline. So, we're going back 7 years ago. When I first got there, it was something that, really with all of the other things related to Theosophy and to the Theosophical Society's work, this one was unavoidable. And it was a very pressing issue. And unlike many things related to Theosophy, where, it's consciousness based and that's good enough, to renovate buildings on this scale was also something that required financial resources
Yes.
that were not apparent at that time. But as with many things with the Theosophical Society and its work, it does seem that when you set your sights in a particular direction, then from corners that you are completely unaware of, the help that is required arrives, and it arrives on time. And so this is something that has occurred during the course of this whole renovation process. We've done an awful lot of work. The Surrender Narayan archives. We moved the archives. They had almost gotten flooded.
I know, I remember. Yeah.
Of course, you're very deeply involved with archives, so you know. And we moved it to a completely renovated space. It'll be there for our lifetimes,
Yes.
for sure. Other buildings, Blavatsky Bungalow was restoration. It wasn't even renovation. We restored it to a beauty that exceeded the way we got it in 1907. And so all of these sorts of things we are doing, and we're taking it step at a time because, I have had the question over the course of my time working for the Theosophical Society in America or in India. Question is, why, bother doing all this work for the organization or for what, when, the books are there, the wisdom is there, why do all this? And, just for me, it's clear. It's not everybody's choice, but for me, it's clear that unless there is something like a Theosophical Society, then what is the mechanism for communicating Theosophy? Unless there is a campus, we have an absolutely remarkable jewel, this Adyar campus. It's 260 acres in the middle of a city of 7 million people and growing.
I like the way that you are passionate about it.
I'm very
the importance to renovate and to
you
keep.
have to.
I agree with you absolutely. It's
And plus, the other thing to me is, if the Theosophical Society is all that it says that it is, then it should also be someplace where beauty is expressed.
Yes.
Where a certain order is communicated, not just through our lips, but through the spaces that we inhabit. They should be harmonious. And decay, at least at least for my personality, that's not something that expresses that. And so we're doing it in a very different way. I am very fortunate that I am not the only one that sees it that way. And, I had a significant learning curve in coming to Adyar. 2014, I became the international president, having put my feet in Adyar 3 times previously for conventions. So I was there a grand total of maybe 3 weeks, and then I'm international president. And India is a learning curve of its own. Adyar is another learning curve superimposed upon that. And so, quite honestly, it was never my intention to impose my, Americanized vision on any place else. So, it took time for me to really work with my coworkers there in Adyar and around the world to learn the things that are important for Adyar. But also, very often things that are described as traditions. There are traditions that are really traditions. They carry on something that has value. But there are other traditions that are a mistake that has been persisted in for a long time. And to distinguish is something that you need to do cautiously. And so we've focused on those things that are important, but at the same time, we have to allow for an expression and a growth of this theosophical work that's suited to the time that we're living in. That's what Blavatsky, Besant, that's what everyone tried to do. And so we're just adding our effort to that now.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful work and a very important one, and something that I was mentioning a lot when I was back in 2008 when I was at the TS in Adyar about the importance to renovate all those buildings and then to restoration. And I think congratulations really are in order for this fantastic work you have been doing, and I hope that you manage eventually to do that to the headquarters itself. Because
we already have plans to start on something
very much needed. I have a question now. How do you deal, Tim, with disappointments? How do you deal when something goes wrong? For example, there was that incident with the convention roof.
Yeah.
That was something that went wrong. So, but in general lines, not only about that specific incident. This is just an example.
Mm-hmm.
As a leader of an organization that has such a powerful history, like the Theosophical Society,
Mm-hmm.
how do you deal with disappointments and with things that may go wrong?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very good question. Hopefully, I'll do justice as an answer. But one of the things that you can expect if you remain alive is disappointment. There is no life that is absent from having strong disappointments of various sorts. So, with this, it's the same. And in many ways, I ran across a quote recently, and taking HPB's advice for many years, she had a book where she would just see some quote that struck her, and she would just write it. And I've been doing that for years. And I ran across one I hadn't heard from Nelson Mandela, who was a man I greatly admired. But he said, in talking about his life and his many disappointments, having been imprisoned for 27 years being one of them, what he said was, I never lose. I either win or I learn. I'm not, you take out the winning part because this isn't a competition.
Mhm.
But in the face of disappointment, obviously, you don't try to deny it and block whatever sense you may have about that moment, because the only reason we're disappointed is because we found ourselves strongly invested. There was something that we really wanted to happen. And when it doesn't, this is where these disappointments result. So, yes, the feelings, the experience, that's fine. And that's one thing. But then for too many people, the choice is to remain stuck in that. It's not something that passes like a wave, it becomes their reality. We had that beautiful idea. I was just so proud, and we were going to put up that surface over the Adyar theater so it could be used year round, and it collapsed. And there were people who had I had spoken to about it, and they had donated significant amounts to do it, and it collapsed. And so that was a huge disappointment. Fortunately, no one was hurt. That was the main thing. But out of that, one reaction, and one that was being urged upon me from certain quarters, was, you see what happens when you try and do these changes around here. Just stop it and just like it the way it is. That wasn't selling. And so the response has been this. We had other renovation projects lined up of much deeper extent than this one.
Yes.
Where did we go wrong on this? And so when we looked at it, it became clear. We relied upon, a contractor. And, we didn't have an independent party representing the Theosophical Society to check with us. Every single project we have done since that time, we have incorporated a consultant for the Theosophical Society who checks the work, who checks the expenses, who checks the materials, and then makes sure to make corrections, who represents us, someone who is an expert in that field. And so that collapse, I end up telling people it's one of the greatest things that has happened because it happened early. And it set me up for the proper way to approach these projects that are going to be ongoing for my whole time there. And so it was a wonderful experience. We didn't lose, we learned. And it was as a group, because it's not just me involved in these things.
Yeah, I think that's very important what you said, that we have to learn and then move forward and take that as a lesson on how we are going to approach things and do things for better. And changing a bit the subject now and asking you in general about the Theosophical Society. What is your vision for the work and future of the Theosophical Society? I know that's a very big question, but in general lines, what is that you have in your heart?
Yeah.
And
it's a very big question, but it's also a very small question.
yes.
In the sense that, there is the purpose for the Theosophical Society coming into being. And, I tend to refer to it more than the Theosophical Society, but the Theosophical movement coming into being was to try to provide an alternative to a direction that humanity, a sort of dead end path. The way it was expressed early on in the, that important letter from the Mahachoa, brutal materialism and, dead letter religion. We're taking humanity pretty much to the same place, but along slightly different paths. And another way had to be introduced. And that moment was thought to be ripe for it. The ideas that were put forth, HPB and Alcott and all of them spent a lifetime just trying to plant the seed of these ideas into the mind. And then, the work goes on. And I think the biggest thing for which this society came into being was so that those seeds could grow in manners that they can be applied. So there are a number of ways in which Theosophy can be applied. In fact, anywhere you find yourself sitting, anyone you find yourself interacting with, there are applications. At Adyar, I really tend to look at it much like a laboratory that we have, and we can try different things. Most recently, we've started a school. We've already had a school there for many years, 120 some years, that was focused on providing an education for people that within the system of India would not be educated. So that school exists and provides a free education to this day. But we wanted to go further. And so we have a Theosophical school that is focused on educating children in a non-competitive, non-fear-based way that connects them to the natural world and to what it means to live compassionately, while you also learn arithmetic and the things that are necessary. So that's an effort to try to instill not theosophical concepts, but that the possibility of living in a theosophical manner, demonstrating it at an early age. At the Adyar campus, there are a lot of things that we do. I had the idea when we got there are things that we had been trying to do for a while. And my sense has been that if we cannot do something properly, if we cannot do it well, we shouldn't be out there spending our efforts in that direction. But we can partner with others. One of the beauties of this whole theosophical worldview is that it has spread so broadly that there are thousands of small organizations doing an aspect of this theosophical work in a manner that's better than what we could do. So we had an animal dispensary where we cared for animals. We had previously tried to license it to some people and they didn't work out. And we were running it. We're not veterinarians. And we were running it badly. We've since partnered with someone for whom animal care is his passion. And this is like a glowing example in the city of Chennai of caring for animals, and mainly animals who are street animals who are abused. So, Theosophy we need to find avenues to express this in something beyond the lecture and the book, which is the things that we started with, because the ideas were not present in global consciousness. So for our future, I think this aspect of examples where Theosophy as the background is radiated through the work that's being done.
Yes, I think that's very important. And then there is something very peculiar in your leadership as international president of the Theosophical Society. Something quite unique is your openness. You are very open. Recently, you allowed, for example, you had a meeting of the allowed Anthroposophical Society, I think. Is it? Yeah, to have a meeting at the international headquarters of the Theosophical Society, Adyar. And I find it so important because you are opening the door for dialogues, for interconnection, and this is so important because, as you said, there are so many small groups out there, doing in some ways the same things that we are doing. And then we have to be connected and working together. So are you planning to open more, and in which ways?
Well, we had the Anthroposophical Group. They do an awful lot high quality education and also education for people with disabilities. So they're wonderful in doing that work. And they approached us about having their regional convention at Adyar. And again, maybe it's my limitations or maybe it's just the nature of my thinking. It's like, why wouldn't we
Yes.
encourage something like that?
Mhm.
Um, and so we did. And, beauty is one of the things that they emphasize in their practice of it. And they came to our campus. They made it beautiful anywhere that they were. They respected our campus almost better than we do sometimes. And out of that, there were dialogues that came about. We do things with them on a regular basis. Members of the Anthroposophical Society became members of the TS. We had relations with them. So it worked very, very well. Years ago, before I became president internationally, just before I took on the presidency in America, I attended, it was the first time that, the to-be president attended the International Theosophical Conferences, ITC. Uh, they'd been going on for a long time. And I went, and they wanted me to, at the opening night, you say something about your organization and, what you're doing there. And one of the things that I said is that the reason why there are all these various different theosophical groups, there's certain history to that. But out of these different sorts of what a lot of people look at as separations, there were bad feelings that occurred. But anybody who I was speaking to that night, I made the point, none of you were alive when any of this happened. So to carry bad feelings is something that you have necessarily decided upon, if that's what you're doing. So we can get beyond that. The work that came out, the work that developed an anthroposophical society, a Point Loma group, a Theosophical Society, Adyar, came into the world for a specific purpose. Let's get on with it. And it's not limited to things that have the branding of Theosophical.
I think that it's amazing, and I'm very happy that you have this openness, and this is so important. Now I have one more question for you before we close our session, our interview today. So, as you noted, humanity has wiped out 6% of mammals, birds, fish, and reptiles since the 1970s. The world's foremost experts warn about the annihilation of wildlife as an emergency that threatens civilization. As theosophists, what do you think we can do to help to improve this dramatic situation?
Well, just as humanity in general first, I think it is one of the unfortunate features of the way that we learn that it does seem that we learn our most profound lessons through crisis. It's unfortunate, but it does seem that as crises arise, you say that there's a pandemic and the world is shut down and people are dying, and in 8 months' time, vaccines that previously took 7 or 8 years pop up globally because of the focus of consciousness, because of a crisis. This is a looming crisis that is no secret, no mystery to anyone. But the habits that we have cultivated keep pushing humanity as a whole closer and closer to the edge. My hope has been to, through whatever it is I can offer, that it will have some influence in allowing people to think a little bit more deeply, to choose differently, and that will have its effect. I think we have reached a time where, for instance, dietary habits. I mean, those are things that are personal. Very often, they're things that are religious. And so people eat the foods that they eat because their parents did and their religion requires it in some cases. But one of the simple facts has been this repeatedly pointed to fact that vegetarian based diet has the largest impact on such things as carbon footprint. So that's one thing where people don't have to suffer, but they do have to change. The fact is that these changes are going to occur. And whether they occur in a very rough manner or whether it occurs in some manner that is at least we can navigate, we still have some capacity to direct that. As a theosophical society, we are trying to choose in sustainable ways. As members of the Theosophical Society, I think we just have to keep emphasizing that we're on the brink of something. And to say that we all cooperate and focus our efforts is not to say that we're going to avoid what we talked about before, disappointment.
Yes.
So you better learn now how to deal with disappointment. I had a very good friend recently, had to go into the hospital, and turned out it was something there was some huge tumor involved.
I'm sorry.
And in talking with them, they were very vibrant people, but she was somebody who had always been very lively. But now, talking to her, and she's saying, "Oh, I think this is it, Tim. I feel it. It's over now. I'm not going." I said, "Well, hold on. The doctors are going to examine it. Wait a week before you step into the grave. Give yourself a week. You should be thinking about that possibility. And you should be thinking about it before somebody tells you that you have a tumor. But don't die just yet." So it turns out it was benign. And, behavior changed immediately. Now I can get back to what I was doing. The sort of thought that I was involved in before, I don't. So crises, in a certain sense, we are engineering this one for ourselves. Whether it will be a source of growth or not will depend on us. There is a big expanse of things over which we have no direct control. You do have complete control over the processes of your mind if you're willing to do the work necessary to access them first, to understand them second, and to leave them alone third.
Yes, yes, that's to change ourselves and to change our way of being and our way of life in order to help all the situation to improve is what you said. I mean, it's perhaps one of the main messages of the theosophical system, isn't it?
I think so.
Now we are reaching the end, and then I would like to ask you if there is anything else you would like to say.
Well, I think we've said an awful lot, and I'm very happy that we were able to make it within time because I often am not famous for talking in sound bites. So it's been very good. Beyond what we've said, I don't think I have a lot to offer, except that Theosophy and the work of the Theosophical Society really, it doesn't have a lot of meaning unless it is something that we really approach as an experiment within our own mind, within our own heart. Unless we are willing to take those steps, we have to study, the value of the things that have been written and said is enormous. But that's not going to get you there by itself. So there is this other level of being that we have to strip away some of these fears that block us from, that keep us clinging to the familiar. Because we're heading into a territory in the world today that is looking ever more unfamiliar, whether it's weather patterns or political changes, all of these sorts of things. So the clinging to the familiar is not the answer. So more of the exploration of the inner and the sharing of what you find there, because it will necessarily be something powerful and beautiful if you approach it properly.
Thank you so much, Tim, for being here with us today and sharing with us much of our experience and your views on the work of the Theosophical Society and on Theosophy. It has been a wonderful evening for me. So thank you so much for being here. Do not go away just yet. Thank you very much for all of you who have been watching us live on YouTube. We are closing now our interview.